It's whatever day it is, and you know what that means. It's time for another Real True Facts. My name is Linda Hamilton.
And I am Gene Rayburn. Not that
Hi,
one.
Gene. Yeah, not that one. If you get creeped out by dolls and slow music boxes, then today this show is all for you because we are talking about cursed objects.
Yeah, we were kind of talking about this episode, cursed objects, curses, it's a really interesting topic, and it exists out there and has existed for so long. I think it's worth taking a look at. People have definitely had experiences, but what does it all mean?
And I don't know where to start with it. I'm very excited to get creepy again this week. I think people are definitely superstitious, and I think they place meaning in objects like, oh, this is a lucky, like these are my lucky socks. This is a lucky rabbit's foot. This is lucky, or oh, that's cursed. Or, we always say dolls, because they have creepy dead eyes that follow you everywhere. So it's like, okay, well, that gives me a bad feeling. This gives me a good feeling. So, it might be worth exploring these cursed objects here.
Yeah, and it goes back through history. I mean, the Spear of Destiny, Hitler, and the whole Nazi culture trying to collect a lot of these objects that maybe weren't cursed, but were supposed to be magical. So it sounds like maybe they're supposed to be good magical objects and bad magical objects. And
I think it comes down to intent too. Like if you have something that holds a lot of power, it's infused with these powers, but you're an evil person, then, the object doesn't know that. So it's like maybe we have a responsibility in warning people about what would happen if you did come across something like this. But, you mentioned the Nazis, but I always think of Ed and Lorraine Warren. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, you're thinking ghosts. Yeah, I'm starting. Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking that too before the show, and then immediately, without even any research, I'm thinking of like Indiana Jones and the Ark. Right. And so, maybe we'll have some different directions to discuss because I'm with you. The dolls, and dolls are interesting, and those artifacts, they're those own kind of. They have their own museum where they kind of house these artifacts to keep them safe.
If you don't know, Ed and Lorraine Warren were demonologists. I believe Ed was a demonologist and Lorraine was a clairvoyant, and they husband and wife team, and they worked together to solve paranormal mysteries. Most famous one was the Amityville horror that I think there's been up to 17 movies made under the Amityville horror series. Yeah.
At least maybe a TV series or two.
Yeah. And The Conjuring.
Yeah. It just goes on and on. Yeah.
But and Annabelle, which is the biggest thing, they've got that doll, which when we said cursed objects, I immediately thought of Annabelle, which is housed in that museum. Although I think the museum is closed. I think Lorraine Warren died a few years ago. And so the future of the museum kind of hangs in the balance here. I think her son was running it, but it's closed now, which kind of makes me worried that if they have this museum of cursed objects just all together, like what's going to happen to them if they're not in this place?
Yeah, if there isn't someone who knows what they're doing, taking care of them, it is worrisome. And so, yeah, the Annabelle doll, which I think a lot of the Chucky stuff from Child's Play was kind of loosely based on or inspired by, at least. I mean, a cursed doll is a cursed doll. So I'll be curious to, when we bring in our special guest this week to, probe into some of these different categories of cursed objects.
Yeah, because I think that there might be a difference between something that kind of just gives you the heebie-jeebies and something that might actually ruin your life. So
ruin the lives of many. Yeah, like the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yeah, which is hilarious. I just watched that movie last night. I hadn't seen it in so long, and it's like, they thwarted it by not looking at it. It's like, well, did they really win against the Ark because they didn't look at it? It's like they still unleashed this curse.
Right.
So.
Yeah. As long as you don't look at it, it doesn't exist. I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
But that's a bit fortunate for two people in that case.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that you watched that last night.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll, I think that's an interesting angle too, when it comes to some historical artifacts that have huge, whenever someone was in its possession, they died.
Yeah.
If that's not a curse, I don't know what is.
Yeah, that's cursed or cursed if you want to get Latin. Is that
like
Latin?
To sound fancy, cursed.
Yeah, cursed.
Yeah. So, listeners, if you hear, some vacillation between cursed and cursed, it's, at least in my case, sometimes I like to sound fancy.
Yeah, we're fancy. But I think this might be a good time. We actually do have Dr. Seymour here this week, right?
Yes, he's. I've been told he's back after some really rough experiments and some lab issues. I don't know. Maybe we should just bring him in and ask him.
I think so. I mean, I miss him when he's not here. So let's get him up from the science bunker here. We'll hack into the bunker. Hi, Dr. Seymour.
Hello. It's great to be back.
Oh,
yes.
Great to have you back. We always worry when you can't make it, considering the dangerous experiments that you're constantly working on.
Yeah, we've had a lot of change in the lab recently. We've at least temporarily shut down our bee experiment. We got what we needed to out of that. We got the honey, if you will, and just the transition, bringing the new crew in and the other crew out. And we're not really at liberty to, at this day, go too deep into our next excursion here. But it's just been all hands on deck. A really crazy time at the lab.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it sounds like almost changing of the guard. Now, here's a kind of, maybe this is a science question. So when you finish one big experiment like with the bees, is this a common practice where you have to kind of bring in all new people and do a cleanse so that you're not, to maybe help the secretive nature of your work? Is that a common practice?
It's not necessarily something that all researchers do, but I do hold myself to a higher standard than most. Working in the science bunker and trying to be the first at each major breakthrough makes a lot of enemies. So you've got to make sure you know who you can trust, and you've got to have the right people around you. And sometimes that's a matter of their areas of expertise. But I've learned the hard way. Sometimes it's a matter of just trusting the wrong people or trusting the right people for too long.
Yeah, I would say that your fortune, your tarot card reading that we did on a previous episode sounds like that's coming true.
Yes, I did think of that. And as you were introducing things and talking about good and bad luck, it took me straight back to that. And I'm going to have a look around the lab for any good luck charms and kind of make sure nobody's sneaking out with anything that we need to get off to the right start for this next round.
Yeah.
Wow. So what, you just made me curious. So you mentioned luck. What in your scientific realm, what does luck mean? What's luck's scientific connotation?
Well, I was told by a professor early on a phrase that stuck with me, that really meant a lot and kind of guided my early years of research, which was luck is for the unprepared. Meaning, you feel like you need luck when you're not ready to do whatever's next. But then guess what? That professor is still just a professor, and I am at the cutting edge of multiple areas of research, constantly breaking ground on things. So I think that idea that luck doesn't exist is more of a phrase that I would, there's another phrase maybe we could use for him: those who can do and those who can't teach. So I would,
sick burn.
I would say that you make your own luck, but to pretend that luck is not something that can turn the fortunes for a person is ignoring thousands of years of reality.
Sure. So maybe we can tap into some of your anthropological side. We do that every so often. And it comes to human history. There are a lot of instances and cases of objects just causing havoc, whether it's whoever just happens to own it dies, or whether it's a direct physical, death or something like that. Have you in your career encountered any sort of, totems or objects that you think that may really hold some kind of power?
I haven't had any objects myself that have been either a good luck or bad luck, or maybe a powerful item beyond its use within the experimentation realm. But I have several colleagues who've seen their careers turn one way or another for as simple of a change as a pen that they wrote their doctoral research finally running out of ink, and that was the first paper when they used the new pen, that was the first paper that was rejected, and then now they are off into the out of the field. Others who win a random, maybe even gag gift, or a new tie from a child that was so hideous they didn't dare wear it more than once. But the day that they wore it was the day of the breakthrough. And I'll tell you what, you saw them in that hideous penguins playing golf tie every day for the next 3 years until they were on the covers of magazines. So it definitely happens all around the scientific community. I'm not sure if there's a lucky totem that I'm unaware of, but I feel blessed that there's not an unlucky one that has been guiding my fate.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like totems. That sounds like good luck charms. Whether the object is lucky or not, the person wearing it or holding onto it believes that it is. And maybe that's all we need. Maybe that's something, because we talk about faith a lot and how there really isn't a lot of crossover in the science community and the supernatural. So we try our best to bridge that gap a little bit. But we talked about good vibes. We've talked about good vibes and bad vibes, and that there is a lot of merit there into believing that something has these powers. And really all you need to do is believe, and whether you believe it or not, you're right.
Correct. And without giving out too much, because as I said, I'm very hesitant as we're transitioning here to give away too much, about our next round of research here. But for quite a while, we've been looking at extra dimensions beyond, length, width, height, time, and really trying to dig deeper into the fifth, the sixth, the seventh, the eighth, the ninth dimension. And there's just so much with what we talk about on this show that is really going to drive the research, and the research will drive the understanding of maybe what isn't as supernatural as we believe, or maybe we'll still be in a place where we're trying to find the connection.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. It may have just been last week or the week before, we dealt with a similar kind of manifestation of power where, an object is, or something, a spirit is given power because of humans believing it. So, and now we add this other element of dimensions that, who knows, maybe these different dimensions really just play a part in that, a normal object from, the sixth or seventh dimension. What does that mean if it hops over into ours? I've been told by many people that magic or magic, for lack of a better word, is just science that we don't understand yet.
Yes, and that's what science is all about: understanding the yet to be understood. And maybe magic is next. Maybe curses are next. Maybe extraterrestrials, ghosts are next, or maybe it's just a low-fat peanut butter that tastes good. We'll see.
Either way, that's a win for the science community and mankind.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I would love that, because I'm seriously doubtful about any sort of butters that can, be low-fat. I'm highly skeptical.
They usually taste terrible. So.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you didn't tip your hat too much, Dr. Seymour, but I'd really love it if, you put your efforts and you're kind of mad genius towards something
into
like that.
that.
Yeah. So, one vote for peanut butter.
That's 2 votes for peanut butter here, and I guess magic as well.
Yeah, that it seems like the magic stuff always kind of works itself out,
Yeah. It does. Well, I think we've got a really good baseline for today. Dr. Seymour, I think, will stick around with us for a little while. We'll check in with him a little later. But why don't we take a quick break? And when we come back, we will meet our special guest and talk all about cursed or cursed objects on Real True Facts. Our guest today is Miles Smartman. He holds a master's degree in supernatural sciences from the School of Science in Nova Scotia. He's currently writing a book about the living nature of dead things. It should be about 10 years until that's out. But let's give him a nice, warm, Real True Facts welcome to the show. Miles, are you with us?
I am here. Thank you so much for having me.
Wow, thanks for coming on. Thanks for coming on, Miles. I've heard a lot of great things, so I'm curious to explore all these different artifacts and what it may or may not mean.
Yeah, it's an interesting job, but somebody has to do it. So I appreciate you having me on. It's important people hear the true facts out there in the world. There's a lot of misinformation.
Oh, that's definitely the truth, and that's what we're here to do, is separate that. So Linda mentioned that you're working on a book, but what in the past, like, what got you interested in all this stuff? Did you have a personal experience? Did you just kind of fall backward into it, or what kind of got this whole thing started?
It's funny you say fall backward. I was actually at a pool one time, and I was, I don't know, probably like 6 or 7 years old, and an older gentleman was sitting in a lawn chair next to the pool, and he, I don't know, lost his balance or something and fell backwards into the pool, and didn't make it. The EMTs came, and he was gone, dead upon arrival. And I don't know, just something about that sparked my interest in the supernatural. Mainly because that pool was supposedly haunted. It was a YMCA pool, and supposedly haunted for many years to come after that. Ironically, the guy was not even a member of the pool. But that's kind of where it all began.
Interesting. So so it was a haunted kind of haunted pool. Those Ys carry a lot of energy, and
I don't know if it's energy or bacteria, but there was something going on in that pool for sure.
Yeah, I can only assume it's a lot of both, a lot of all of that, with just people coming and going. And so maybe it was the why of it all, that sparked your imagination. And what was your first step? What was your next step after that event? Like, what did you go out and do?
I think, like anybody, you rent the movie Poltergeist. You see that old lady with the weird voice, and that kind of is like a calling to you. And it's a fascination. I have in anything that comes back from the dead, and it's just been kind of a passion in life. And I'm not good at anything else, so I guess I should stick with this.
I think it's important that these things, because you were a child when this started, right?
Yeah, so it's about 7.
Yeah, I think it's important when we're dealing with things like the supernatural that the fascination comes very naturally to children. I think children are sort of an open conduit to the supernatural. I always think, for example, my nephew, when he was little, he was obsessed with the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Good song.
Yeah, he would listen to it all the time, and he would draw pictures of boats, and he would just get really serious about it. And you think, man, where is that coming from? There's no reason that he would, actively seek this out. I think he just felt compelled to become involved in that. And
children traditionally have a very short attention span, so being obsessed with such a very long song, that says a lot.
Yeah, and I think that naturally spurs a fascination, like you said, with these things. And so it's very cool to me that you have dedicated your career and your education to something like this, because it's something that we may never know the answers for sure, but we're getting pretty close these days.
Yeah, it's becoming a sort of exact science, a lot of hypotheses and a lot of scientific methods being put into place. And, you're just trying to prove something wrong or correct. That's the basis of science. If you can prove something wrong, then it is scientifically valid. And that's kind of where we're at with this, this study of all of these things.
So I'm curious. I kind of want to get down into it immediately. We mentioned Annabelle, the Annabelle doll, in our intro. Have you looked into or done any research on things like these haunted dolls, or maybe the Warrens or that kind of stuff?
Yeah, actually, I purchased one of them on eBay, believe it or not. It was up for auction, and I just, you have a couple of drinks, it's 2 a.m, and, next thing you know, it's showing up at your door. Sure. And I've had some weird stuff happen. I really have. So it's from a scientific perspective, it has proven that hypothesis. And it's been an interesting experience, and maybe a mistake to spend $50,000 on a Tuesday night. But overall, I think it's been good for the study of all of this, and I don't really regret the purchase.
Mm-hmm. What sort of things have been happening?
Sometimes it's like 4 a.m. You get up to let your dog out, and the door closes, and you look behind you, and there's nobody around. It's 4 a.m. It's dark out, and then you look, and I have Annabelle in a glass case in a separate room. I would not sleep in the same bedroom as that object, but just the look on its face is slightly different, and it could be the window I left open that is plausible, but you look this thing in the eye and you go, I think you had something to do with this.
Yeah, there's something going on there.
Yeah, it's been a lot of little things like that. And, the car alarm goes off, and I look out the window and a man is running away. But I'm like, I don't know. Was it him? Probably not. It was probably the doll locked in the glass case in my house. Yeah. So it's just a lot of things where you're like, I don't think I'm stretching the truth. I don't think I'm reaching for conclusions here. It all seems pretty valid.
Yeah, I'm just happy to hear that it's small stuff right now, because we oftentimes we only hear about the awful, the terrible things. That's what gets made into movies, that's what makes headlines. So I'm happy to hear that it's right now, at least it's just small stuff. Do you plan on keeping this object? What do you plan on doing if things start to get past the small stuff?
So far, nothing too major has happened. I've lost a few relationships over it. My wife divorced me about 5 years ago, and it was a tough choice. It's like, okay, she gives me that ultimatum, do I get rid of this very expensive, very interesting scientific doll that is giving us a clue into what lies beyond the human existence, or do I let go of Cindy? And, I chose Cindy. So it's, I don't know, maybe one day I'll come to my senses. But right now, this is more fascinating than, going to the same
I would argue
taco
that you
restaurant.
Did come to your senses. If we're being honest.
I certainly, her lawyer says otherwise, but it certainly feels correct to me. So it has been a bunch of little things and nothing huge, nothing monstrous of an event that would cause for Hollywood to come knocking on my door. Because if you think about it, if they were all massive events like this, there would be nonstop movies. It would just be constant movie after movie after movie, and it's you can only tell the same story so many times.
Yeah, it's really not. It's just like retellings of the same thing. I have to think that maybe because you have these little things happen, and it's I didn't know that you had Annabelle herself.
It's like Annabelle's sister, Mabel.
Right.
Yeah, so it's not the original. I couldn't afford that. I've seen that go up on eBay, and it comes down very quickly. So,
but you could be chosen if these dolls have caused terrible things to happen in the past, like with Amityville, the most famous case. A man was possessed and compelled to kill his family, and that was what the house had done and what those spirits had done. But if you have one of the cursed dolls and only minor things are happening that just sort of creep you out a little bit, you could very well have earned the respect of this entity that's in the doll.
I mean, it's possible. Maybe I'm seeking it out too. I've never really had much respect given back to me in my life, so maybe it's kind of a mutual thing. We're all just seeking the love that we think we deserve, and maybe that's part of it. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So let's go back, maybe back even further, like we'll start from, really long time ago. I'm familiar with, as I mentioned in the intro, some of the older kind of really well-known stuff like the Ark of the Covenant, the Spear of Destiny. I think it has some other names. I can't remember at the moment, something Lance and something. But have you...
Like the Tesseract?
I'm not as familiar with that one. But yeah, I'm guessing it's like that. Have you done any research into these types of objects that have gone through history, through hundreds and even thousands of years, causing havoc or people trying to obtain them?
Yeah, sure. I have a master's degree in all this stuff, so I've done many thesis papers on these things, and it seems like it's always just random. I mean, you see these kind of creepy doll objects like we were just talking about, but it's always just a random object. It's like, somebody's quill from 1700s, and that just gets passed down from, one thing to the next. I mean, that's Andrew Jackson, he gets a lot of crap, but really he just had this really demonic quill, and that made him incredibly racist. So there are things that are just simple, equivalent to grains of sand that you wouldn't even notice, that just go through history and have influenced humanity and humankind without us even realizing it. It is quite fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. Because I think, my brain again goes to things like a big, the ark, something that stabbed Jesus. And but it sounds like some of these lesser known objects, or at least lesser known to me, are what have caused even more problems, like a quill or, or similar. What do you think may start this whole thing? It might kickstart, like what would get a quill or turn a quill into something that could cause this much trouble?
I think it has a lot to do with like the person that's holding on to it, as they pass on to the next side. Like, what was their state of mind? Were they angry, depressed, anxious? All those things kind of get transferred into the object. If you're holding on to something as simple as a old timey pen or a jacket, or even a horse, you're riding a horse, and you're having a bad day because your farm is going under, you're not making enough sugar crop, not enough for the plantation, you're losing money, and then you kick the bucket, and then that gets transferred into the horse. So it's sometimes a living object as well. So I think a lot of it is just kind of our mental state of mind, and that's only something we've recently been studying these years, is mental health and all those aspects of the brain that go into it. So it's quite fascinating.
So what you're saying is that people aren't necessarily in charge of their own actions. There might be something more sinister influencing that. For instance, like a quill, or maybe a microphone, or something that they would need to be able to communicate that device or that object is causing them to have such vitriol and things like that.
Sure, yes, it needs to be some sort of communication device. That tends to be the most common thing. Just any sort of access point. It's a microphone, it's a radio, it's a pen to paper. It can be whatever you want, but it's in the case of like a doll, it is something more. It is, it's a evil entity that is coming through somebody else, or something that is passed on. So there are different levels to all of this, and it's not as simple as apples and oranges as people like to make it out in Hollywood. They have to kind of simplify it for the mass public to comprehend these things, but we're trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. It is a strange study of this science, and we're only at the tip of the iceberg.
Now, when we're looking at two people like Ed and Lorraine Warren, who have made their lives, they have passed, unfortunately, but they made their lives from studying these things, and in their possession, they seem to have a lot of dolls. And with this idea of communication, it makes me feel like a doll is a very good vessel for those things, because when you're a kid, you play with those things and you talk to them and you talk through them. Is there any sort of merit there? Like, why do you think dolls end up being the go-to thing?
Well, I think simply put, they're just creepy as the dickens. They are just creepy. They are equivalent to ventriloquist figures. A very small percentage of sane people like them and hold on to them. So there's something to that. But as a kid, you have a doll, and that's the thing you grasp on. That becomes your best invisible friend. And a lot of those aspects go into it too. So depending on what happened to the child who originally had the doll and what the doll experienced with that child gets carried on, from generation to generation.
Oh, so it kind of goes back to what we discussed earlier with, humans projecting onto objects, and then the manifestation from there. So a doll is something that it really as a toy or as any other function, it only works if you project onto it, if you give it attributes or give it something from yourself.
It's the same, it's the same as human to human connection too. We are constantly projecting our own thoughts and wants on other people. So it's no different from an inanimate dead object. It's the same part of the human brain that we're using, believe it or not.
Which I believe is the topic of your book.
It is, yes, for sure. And that's what I've been working on for about 10 years now, just trying to convey that message to everybody. If you want to say the title of the book, you can let them know. That would be great. It's going to be out on Amazon within the next decade. It's just been a lot of research and work that has gone into it.
Yeah, I believe that title is The Nature of Living Dead Things.
Correct. Yeah, I would say it myself. But
and there is a question mark at the end of it. I know I said it like a question. That's because there is a question mark at the.
No, you said that absolutely correctly. Okay, yes, good. Just because we don't know, it's very important to leave those things open ended. For liability reasons, we don't want too many lawsuits coming our way, and also just to let people know science is constantly an evolving thing. We're constantly learning new things, and once we take in new information, we're able to adapt and adjust to it. So it's no different in this aspect of the sciences.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why it has taken you this long to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. That, and I'm a very slow reader and writer, so there's a lot of that part of it too.
Well, it happens.
So why don't we take a quick break and pick back up with Miles Smartman.
And I'd like to bring Dr. Seymour back in for a little bit of questioning too, so we will be right back. We're back on Real True Facts after a short break. We're talking today all about cursed objects. Before we bring our special guest back for another round of intense questioning, I wanted to ask Dr. Seymour, because Miles Smartman did bring up the idea of the brain and how the brain is connected and all of this. And Dr. Seymour, I know you are a neurologist as well. What can you say to the importance of the brain when it comes to either perpetuating curses or putting that energy out into the world? Is that something that is really important to us?
Yes. The brain is probably one of the top 5 most important organs in the human body. And in terms of memories, projecting, making connections, I would say, and I think most scientists agree, it is the most important in terms of that. But yes, there's so much internal being tied to memory, being tied to your fears, your unconscious, your childhood. The things imprinted on you, there we go, as a child, before you even had your childhood memories, that you can really start to connect with these objects that goes forward and maybe is not the cause, but allows us to see the luck, the lack of luck, the curse, if we will, in a certain object. And there's been a lot of talk about the communication objects. Obviously, Mr. Smartman was saying is totally correct there. But we just keep coming back to dolls as well. And a big thing I want to kind of point out there is a lot of a child's experiences before their conscious memories are connected to some sort of stuffed animal, some sort of doll, some sort of object that they have lots and lots and lots of experiences with, and have a very strong emotional connection with, but they have no specific memories of those initial connections. So whatever happened during that time, whether it was a family member, a friend, being an especially frightening game of peekaboo, that can be tied to that object for a very long time going forward.
Wow, fascinating. Let's go ahead and bring our guest back in, Miles Smartman. Welcome him back to the show. Miles, this is very interesting, enlightening things for us. I'll just ask you, is it the brain or is it magic?
Well, I think you guys touched on this earlier. Magic is just, anything that's indistinguishable from science until it's, proven. So I guess it's a little both. It's depending on how you want to observe it as a human being. I know people that, think magic is real and they think there are goblins and trolls and things like that. And that's, in my opinion, absurd. But I am looking at it from a scientific perspective. I am looking at it from the brain. How is the brain being affected by these haunted objects, and what is our projection of these haunted objects? What do we want from them, and what do we think we're getting from them? So it's a bunch of questions that we don't really have the answers to just yet.
You sound like a really kind of well-researched kind of guy, and so it makes me curious. Out of all your research and case studies, is there a particular case or two that stand out in all your research as one of the most wild or weird that you could share with our listeners?
Well, what's ironic is I have a master's degree in this. So I've done a lot of research, as I've said before, and I just didn't feel like doing more research to get my doctorate, because you feel like you get to a point and what's the point?
You can only learn so much.
Exactly. And there's still so much we don't know. But ironically, the opening scene in the first Ghostbusters in that hotel with the Slimer type character, that was based on an actual event that happened in a New York hotel. A lot of people think that was just the clever mind of Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, but it wasn't. This was a factual thing. Obviously, there wasn't a green monster floating through, and there wasn't men in jumpsuits that came with magical guns that put them in a little box that smoked. But that was an event that inspired the movie. So we have to look at events from cinema, and a lot of them are traced to actual human experiences and things people have gone through. So that is just one that sticks out in my mind, and was fascinating to find out when I was researching it in my bachelor's.
Oh, so do you have any more information on what the case was, what the reality was on that? Was it, so it was an actual ghost, or was there... what was that the real situation there?
Yeah, well, this was actually, it wasn't a ghost so much as it was a haunted those wheel tray things where the bus boys, and they'll bring people room service in bed. It was a haunted tray like that.
Oh, a cart.
Thank you. One of those haunted carts, believe it or not. And that was the object that had been possessed. Apparently some busboy or something had passed away. He fell through the laundry chute and perished, and landed on one of those moving carts, and then that caused the cart to be possessed. And so that's where that inspiration came from. And Hollywood needed to jazz it up. They needed to add some sort of a green monster to it, which is just frankly ridiculous in my mind. But you got to, like I said, you have to simplify it for people. You have to make it easy for people to
otherwise
digest.
Otherwise it turns into Jerry Lewis.
Exactly.
There's nothing really sexy about a cart, I guess.
No, it's a very simple
boy falling down the chute. Yeah, it just has Jerry Lewis written all over, and that and Ghostbusters. And
ironically, the busboy that fell through the chute did look exactly like Jerry Lewis. He had the teeth and the nutty professor. So then they didn't want that comparison in the Ghostbusters movie, because then you wouldn't take it seriously.
Right? Yeah.
One more reason.
Yeah, kind of comical.
Yeah. So
frankly, Yeah, I'm pleased that that connection wasn't made. But that's a personal preference when it comes to movies. I prefer the Ghostbuster variety over a Jerry Lewis per se.
Sure, I think a lot of people do.
We see a lot of hotels in movies that are haunted or possessed. Obviously, The Shining, that's a big one. There was one in there was a John Cusack movie where he was in a haunted hotel or a hotel room.
Mm-hmm.
Those things are always fascinating to me. We're talking about just the power of the mind and the power of people. And I think maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you would know, I speculate wildly sometimes, that because hotels have so many people that pass through them, you have so many opportunities for those different energies and different intents behind people wanting to inhabit different things and people using the same objects over and over again. There might be some remnants of their energy left behind.
Yeah, well, what's interesting about hotels is a lot of the people that pass through are prostitutes or very rich businessmen, and they're already dead inside to a point. So things really can't latch on to them as much as they would as, a kind family from the Midwest. They're more wholesome. They haven't experienced tragedy to the level that certain people have. So it's a little bit easier of a soul to kind of interact with and, latch onto and, go from object to object with them in their lives. Kind of terrorizing them in different ways. So it's not always what you think, and it's sometimes it's not the amount of people, it's the type of people that come through.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that also, when you mention the cart and the hotels, I also wonder about the age of objects, how much that matters, right? Because we always hear about, a spooky old fill in the blank, a spooky old book, a spooky old quill, a spooky, we don't often hear about, this cell phone, a spooky cell phone or a computer. Have you encountered any cases of a modern object or a fairly modern object that's cursed?
It takes about 10 to 20 years. We're starting to see, cellular telephones from, car phones from the early 90s, having possession issues, or Razor telephone, the hip Razor telephone from the 2004 era is now reaching the progression.
Finally, the original Moto Razor, and they actually just introduced in the past year or two a new Moto Razor, which is interesting. I wonder if that gives it any extra energy or juice, some of these original
I think
objects.
So. Yeah, you look at, even the Annabelle doll that was the first generation, and then there was a second generation that came out, and then suddenly the children wanted the next new greatest thing. So I think there's a little bit of jealousy and animosity that comes with that too from these inanimate objects.
Yeah, that doll was a Raggedy Ann doll. Those dolls have been around forever. It wasn't like some random doll that your grandma made you. It was like, this is a mass-produced doll that everyone wants. And then if there's a new model that comes out that's maybe fully articulated or something, you're not going to want that one anymore.
Yeah, just wait for the original iPod Classics, the Gumdrop iMacs, the Dell computers. It's coming. There is a war brewing right now, and you're going to hear a lot about that in the next couple of years.
So in one way, it's almost a boon for consumerism in that we should be, getting rid of and replacing items that are, kind of near that 15-year mark or whatever it may be. We should, if we want to stay free of cursed or cursed objects, it might be smart to, throw away anything that's over 10 years old and just buy more stuff.
I literally just sold a car today, and it was 11 years old, and I was like, good riddance, because this is your problem now. It is just a matter of time before that thing starts driving itself.
Well, you get rid of old stuff, you feel relieved. No one ever felt good hanging on to something old.
Yeah.
And so,
I feel a little bit bad. The lady who I sold it to was very nice and very sweet and paid cash for it, but luckily I gave a false phone number and it was fine.
It's new to her. It was one man's trash is another man's treasure. It's
very true.
It's new to her, so it could have a brand new life there. I happen to think about the idea of replacing old technology with new technology, and that there might be some animosity between objects. If a new object is more coveted, which is a sin, by the way, but if a new object is coveted over something else, that old object might maybe have a little bit of a grudge. Case in point, I believe I had a haunted printer once. It was right when the inkjet printers came out. I remember we had those old like matrix printers with the perforated paper, and you could pull the edges off and everything. And we switched over.
Make a slinky out of the dot matrix printer paper. Yeah.
In the carbon, sometimes carbon triplicate. Anyway, we got a new inkjet one, and right before we got the new one, the old one started having a mind of its own, and it kept printing the name Deborah over and over on its own. It would just start in the middle of the night. It would print Deborah over and over and over and over, and we'd wake up and there would just be a scroll, because it wasn't individual pages. It was like a scroll of pages coming out that just said Deborah in all caps.
Well, it's fascinating.
All those pages
you say that, actually, because there is a famous story of a woman named Deborah who the house burnt down, except the only thing left was her printer. And, the tabloids all said that had something to do. It had to be the printer. This is a plastic printer. Why didn't it burn down? But, people dismissed it. And you hear stories about that quite often. So it's not uncommon.
Okay, good. I feel very validated at this point.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I just never connect. I never thought about that sort of thing. And, I don't like to necessarily talk about my personal life too much on the show. But I mean, I've been into, cell phones since, the bag phones and the car phones, as were mentioned earlier. And one of my older phones that I kept because, you just want to have a spare, it would ring in the middle of the night, even though I hadn't been using this thing for 5 or 10 years, and the battery's dead. And I just figured it was just got a jolt of juice or something, and just kind of popped up, just a weird glitch. But now I'm wondering, maybe glitches are, maybe I should take a look at that when I get a chance. It could be a cursed cell phone because it's hitting that kind of age, and it's, printers, and now I'm a little more concerned than I was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same as deja vu. We don't know exactly what is causing it. We think it's the brain quickly resetting, making it feel like we've lived this moment over before, or it's the Matrix. We're not sure. We're in between, and that's where we're at with these haunted objects. It's still just a learning lesson for all of us, and we're curious about them, and that's what keeps us doing the research.
Yeah, I'll have to look more, because if it were a glitch, I shouldn't hear heavy breathing, when I pick it up and answer it.
Especially if you're the only one in the room. Yes.
Yeah, it just should. Now it's starting to make a little less sense as a glitch. A cell phone that hasn't been charged for 10 years, and there's heavy breathing, and saying my name in whispers on the other end. It's starting to sound more weird now that I think about it.
Ghost phone.
Whereas before,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hauntings in the digital age.
Hold on to those rights, because Hollywood's going to want to make that film for the tweens and in betweens there.
Wow. It'll be retro for them. So
true.
Yeah. Especially a phone where you have to text. It's T9. Press buttons multiple times to text.
Yeah, and that's how they. I can see it now. That's how they get murdered. How the first one gets murdered, because they can't figure out how to text their friend. Hey, I'm locked in the closet.
Yeah, help takes a while in T9.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't miss those days.
That's the log line right there. That's
Oh, boom. Yeah, that's
good. That's good.
Wow.
You guys can pitch this.
Yeah. I'm going to make a quick phone call to my agent. How about we take a quick break?
Sounds good. We'll be right back.
We're back after our final break on this week's episode of Real True Facts with Miles Smartman, here talking about cursed objects. We're on the last leg, and before we close the science bunker, Dr. Seymour is still with us, I believe. Dr. Seymour, we've kind of touched on a lot of different things this week. Any words of scientific advice for folks out there to leave us with this week?
Linda kind of touched on it earlier, and I wasn't sure if we would ever kind of get around to this, she did talk about, coveting the newer objects. And I do think it's important if we go back to, there's a lot of different belief systems. And as we've said, there's the overlap between belief in paranormal, the scientific community, religions. But it is important to remember that maybe to many of our listeners, the first of the cursed objects was maybe the apple given by the serpent.
Wow.
So
I didn't even think of
deep.
that, but yeah, such a good point.
So to just be aware that maybe it's your own choices or your own decisions or an option you're presented with yourself. I don't know. But the thing I'm happy about is that we have good teams of researchers who are able to sacrifice their own personal relationships, as Mr. Smartman has, to delve deeper into this, because we're not going to figure it out on our own.
Wow. We always go to Dr. Seymour for the hard science facts, but this week he's really dropping the philosophy on us. I have to say, Linda, I got some goosebumps.
I know. I just I'm feeling it big time.
So thank you this week, Dr. Seymour, for coming on.
And thank you for having me. I look forward to being back with you soon.
Yeah, working on that peanut butter. We'll close up the science bunker with Dr. Seymour. Always good to have him back with us. Miles, so we're going to wrap up here with you, but we wanted to see if you had any final thoughts for us, and then Gene will ask our final question of the day.
Thank you so much for having me. Just keep searching. I coined a phrase in the early 90s that was stolen from me from a very popular television show, but the truth is out there, and I'm still waiting on the royalties on that, but that kind of keeps me going. The truth is out there, and no matter how you're feeling or what your opinion is on all of this, there's something to be learned for all of us.
Wow. So, yeah, I hope Linda was referring to this, but it's the question that's always on my mind when we have a guest is if we encounter possibly maybe a cursed object, or who knows, maybe a lucky object, but in this case, cursed object, is there anything we should do to defend ourselves or anything we should keep in mind? We use a bear as an example. If you encounter a bear, you stop, drop, and roll, make yourself big, loud noises. In your opinion, if we encounter a cursed object, what do you recommend?
Honestly, I would just get out of the situation as quickly and efficiently as possible. You use the illustration of a bear. This could sometimes be like being around 1,000 bears. And I wouldn't recommend being in that situation. I wouldn't even put my greatest enemy in any of those situations. So this is a very, we're talking about this lightly, but it's a very serious situation. So do get yourself to safety as efficiently as possible.
Right. Yeah, it does become light because I think, Linda, it's a fun jab at me because it's the question that always comes to my mind is it's this weird personal safety, like, oh my gosh, I just imagine a poster on the wall, like, what should you do if you encounter a cursed object? So in this case, it's get out of the situation as quickly and efficiently as possible because it's equivalent to being surrounded or being around 1,000 bears.
Mm-hmm. It's all fun and games until somebody gets murdered. So
yeah, all fun and games until it's 1,000 bears. Folks.
Yeah,
that's much more than 1 or even 100. That's a lot of bears. But
we want to thank you, Mr. Smartman, because we know that you are putting yourself in harm's way and really going against your own advice by continuing to study these objects and to even have one of these objects in your possession. So we are eternally grateful for the work that you are doing and having you on the show to talk about your experiences and to inform our listeners.
Oh, great. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much.
So we have some mail today.
All right, Linda, what do we have?
Let's go into that. Great show today.
Open up our mailbag.
Let's open up the mailbag. So this comes from Rod Tubes. His name is Rod. He says, I'm assuming it's a he. I could be wrong, but you never know. He says, long-time listener, first-time emailer. With the government now admitting that UFOs exist and they've recorded them on video and they're most likely not of this world, do you think they're prepping us for a first contact, or have they already made contact and are slowly introducing us to the idea of it before they expose it to us?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you like, I can field that.
Yeah, field that one. He's got a couple other questions too, but start with that one.
Oh yeah, we have made contact. So you're correct in the latter, in saying that we've already made contact, but they're prepping us. We mentioned this in one of our previous episodes, I believe, but they're kind of dribbling out information so it's more digestible. They're just kind of slowly easing it out. So that's the answer to that one. Yes, we already have, and they're just prepping us.
Definitely. He goes on to say that he enjoyed the doppelganger episode, and he wanted to know, is Avril Lavigne actually just a doppelganger of herself now? It's thought the real Avril disappeared some time ago and is replaced by her doppelganger. He also says, do you think... He's got a lot of questions. He said long-time listener, so he's had some time.
Sounds like, yeah.
He's going to have some time to come up with some stuff. He says, do you think it's possible Bigfoot is just blurry in real life? And he says, also, you should do a show on the Mandela effect.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a lot there. Yeah, and I think we're actually going to touch on some of these questions in an upcoming episode and some follow-up. Yes. But I am not familiar with the Mandela effect. Are you?
Yes.
What is that?
It is. It's like the butterfly effect, like the movie The Butterfly Effect.
So if you make one small change in the past,
you make one small change. Or it's like the collective memory. Like, I think it comes from Nelson Mandela was in prison and then he was freed, and some people thought he passed away in prison, so they were shocked when he was freed. There was also, so they have this idea where it's like the collective memory of people.
Oh, it's the collective memory effect. Okay, so where like the Berenstain Bears.
Yes, the Berenstain or Berenstain Bears.
Where people say no, that didn't exist.
And then if Sinbad did a movie where he was a genie, that was Shazam or Kazam
versus Shaq's Kazam.
Versus that one. Like people have that memory of Sinbad being a genie in something. I actually have that memory. I remember watching Sinbad be a genie in a movie.
Well, I don't know. I mean, his clothing was very genie-like just in his stand-up, you know. So I can see some collective memory disputes, if you will. And Shaq, I mean, is doing some great stuff now with pizza. So there's just a lot to unpack here. We'll have to make notes. Yeah. This is a lot of great questions.
Great questions.
And hopefully we'll address some of the more of them in the future. But if we don't, send us another email, right? We have an email address, correct?
We do. A brand new email address. It's mail@realtruefactspodcast.com. And you can see, or I guess listen to all of our shows at our new website. Should link right to our Podbean, which is realtruefactspodcast.com. You'll be able to hear everything there. You can also follow us on Instagram at realtruefactsgram. There's lots of info about things behind the show, more info on our guests. And sometimes we pose questions to our followers as well. I think the latest question we posed was, would you kill your doppelganger? And we can talk all about that. We have a follow-up episode coming up shortly, and we'll answer some questions about doppelgangers, maybe deal with the Avril Lavigne thing.
I'd like to put something out to our listeners. If there is a platform that you listen to podcasts on that we are not in, I want you to let us know, because that's one thing I think we do really well is we're on just about every platform that exists. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google, Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, even YouTube. So let us know if you're like, hey, I use blank. I'm curious. I want to know, because now all you have to remember is realtruefactspodcast.com. email can go there, and that'll take you to the Podbean. But that's my question for you guys. Is there any sort of outlet you use that we aren't on? Because I'd like to be surprised.
Let
I'll
us
take
know.
it as a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, our listeners are from all over the world, and we certainly appreciate that. So if there's an easier way for you to listen to us in that way, yeah, definitely let us know. But you can send us emails. You can send us DMs on Instagram. We live in bunkers, but we're actually very easy to get a hold of.
Sure, slide in.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, those are our questions for today. So thank you, Rod, for writing in and asking us questions. Listeners, you can always do that too. And if we like your stuff, you might get featured on the show.
Yeah, just like that, and you might give us great ideas for another episode, like that Mandela effect.
I want to talk more about Sinbad.
Yeah, we could do a full episode on Sinbad.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
or Sinbad versus Shaq. I kind of like that vibe.
Yeah. So yeah, let's definitely do that. So I think that is it for us today. I want to thank our special guest, Miles Smartman, for coming on. Also, a really lovely episode with Dr. Seymour. He was able to join us for the whole thing, which is wonderful. And thank you, Gene. And thank you to all of our listeners. We really can't do it without you. If you love what you hear, follow us, tell your friends, helps us do our job better and bring you all the best real true facts out there. And you know what I always say? Keep questioning your world, because just because you read about it or hear about it doesn't mean it's true. We will see you next time on another episode of